In 2019, large protests broke out in Hong Kong in response to the government's attempt to amend its fugitive law and establish a mechanism to transfer fugitives from Hong Kong to outside of the city, including mainland China. The introduction of the bill caused widespread criticism from Hong Kongers as well as the international community. Legal professionals, journalist organizations, business groups, and even foreign governments all expressed concerns that the bill would harm the city's legal systems and its built-in safeguards. And on the front line of these protests stood Jimmy Lai, a billionaire who founded the best-selling Chinese newspaper Apple Daily in Hong Kong. He showed up at protests in support of the anti-extradition movement, quietly and peacefully demonstrating his dissent. His newspaper, Apple Daily, at the time proudly shared his political stance and continued to give voice to Hong Kongers who yearn for democracy and freedom. With its popularity among the Hong Kongers, it was almost unimaginable that this beloved newspaper would be forcibly shut down one day, and its owner behind bars since December 2020. How did he get there? What happened to Apple Daily? And what is happening in Hong Kong? In June 2020, Beijing introduced a new national security law for Hong Kong, claiming that Hong Kongers must be protected from foreign interference.
Over the past year, the Hong Kong community has been traumatized. Violence by rioters has escalated, with illegal firearms and explosives posing a terrorist threat. Groups and individuals advocating Hong Kong independence and colluding with foreign forces to interfere with Hong Kong's affairs have seriously undermined national interest and security.
In August of the same year, Jimmy Lai and several Apple Daily executives were arrested under the national security law. Police raided their office, confiscated equipment, and obtained their personal cell phones. Facing multiple charges, Jimmy Lai was convicted in 2021 for his pro-democracy activism, beginning with a 1-year prison sentence for participating in a rally. His sentence is extended on various counts, such as organizing public processions and lighting candles at a Tiananmen Square massacre vigil. And in June 2021, the lights at Apple Daily went off. The newspaper was unable to continue operating due to frozen assets and the arrest of its senior staff. Apple Daily printed its last issue on June 24, 2021, marking the end of Hong Kong's most independent Chinese-language newspaper. On December 10, 2022, Jimmy Lai was sentenced to 5 years and 9 months in prison on alleged fraud charges that were described by the U.S. State Department as spurious. Today, Jimmy Lai is still standing trial in the High Court of Hong Kong for the charge of conspiring to collude with foreign forces. He pleaded not guilty to any of the charges against him under the national security law. And governments, press freedom and human rights organizations around the world are issuing statements condemning the Hong Kong authorities' persecution against Jimmy Lai.
The U.S. strongly condemns the prosecution of pro-democracy advocate and media owner Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong under the PRC-imposed national security law. The U.S. renews our call for the immediate and unconditional release of Jimmy Lai, who has been imprisoned under Hong Kong's national security law The United States will continue to closely monitor developments with this and other prosecutions under the national security law.
That was the White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre on the trial that could potentially affect Hong Kong's status as one of the world's leading international finance centers. You're listening to The Divide, where we explore the many factors that create divisions in an era of deep differences. I'm your host, Iris Xu. Today, we are diving into the contrasts, not just in how we see the present, but also in how we envision the future. As we discuss Hong Kong and the controversial trial of Jimmy Lai.
I'm Mark Simon. I was with Apple Daily since 2001. I met Jimmy Lai in 2000. Then I met him again in 2001, and he invited me for a job. I took it. Over the years, I started out working with the logistics group. Then I became the assistant general manager at Apple Daily. I became the general manager at Apple Daily. I became the CEO of the digital unit. Then I became the CEO of the Next Animation, the animation unit. Then I became the group director, and the group director was basically the overall revenue generation and large business development projects. I also ran Jimmy's family private office. Jimmy used to describe me as his deputy or his assistant, depending on just whatever term he didn't use.
Mark Simon worked closely alongside Jimmy Lai and his media empire Next Digital for more than 2 decades. An absolute free market kind of businessman who narrowly escaped Hong Kong police force's arrest in 2020. Now he is speaking out about his former boss and why he is doing everything he can to free Jimmy Lai.
You know, he's a very unique man, like a lot of these very successful guys are. You know, I can't imagine somebody really knows Elon Musk or knew Steve Jobs or knew Bill Gates or understands, you know, Morris Chang or all these things. I mean, their families know them, but other than that, they don't have time for the personal entanglements. Jimmy, I wrote something the other day. There's 2 traits with Jimmy that I always liked about Jimmy as a person. I'll start off on a person. The first trait with Jimmy is he always listened. That's a big deal. Not as many people do it. I'm told all the time I'm not very good at it. But he listens. And I noticed that. And so what he does by listening is he shows respect. Listening is a form of respect. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to say yes, but he listens to people. Now, he may not listen to the whole pitch. You know, in other words, but he would let somebody at least get their points out. And then he'd say, okay, that's it. So as a boss, he listens to you. The final thing and the most important thing is, I've never personally met a man in my life or a person in my life who has less pettiness. Jimmy has no pettiness. It just doesn't exist. I've never seen the man say, let's get this guy or let's nail that guy. In fact, I've seen more than a few times where he saw that type of behavior and we cut it off. Doesn't mean he couldn't be tough. He's a tough guy. It's the nature of the life. Petty behavior, as you get older and as you get wiser, you start to see it, and you're looking at the things, and it's the small things. And Jimmy, I never saw petty behavior on his part. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't fire people. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't cut a hard deal. But never saw pettiness. In other words, when somebody was vulnerable, he would never take advantage of it. And I thought that was always an impressive trait in the man.
On January 19, 2024, the U.S. Congress-funded international broadcaster Voice of America released a report saying that 2 U.S. citizens have been named in the trial, and one of them is Mark Simon. Now wanted by the Hong Kong police force, I asked Simon about whether the arrest warrant is affecting his life outside of Hong Kong.
I'm sitting here talking to you. I go back and forth to America. I am going to go to a basketball game in Purdue on February 22nd and watch them play. I, last night, had cigars with 5 or 6 guys from the Taiwanese defense industry. I'm a free man, so who gives a damn what the Chinese think? I don't really care. But every day I think about Jimmy, and I have many other friends in there too. Lee Chuck Yan, Claudia Mo. I don't know Gwyneth well. I don't know Chow well. It's really funny that I don't know Joshua well either, as many years as we've been in the same track. But I know more than a dozen. And I see that I am free and they are not. So I am eternally grateful. And, we made the decision for me to leave. Everybody said, oh, you just got out by the skin of your teeth. I myself think, because I'm an American and I'm politically active, my belief is nobody in Hong Kong really wanted to pick me up. So I always believed, and I was kind of told this, that the next time I flew out, I may not be flying back in. I don't think anybody wanted to arrest me. Why would you want to have that fight? And the other thing, too, is that when I made the decision to leave, I purposely didn't tell Jimmy until I was leaving that day. I said, look, I'm going to Taiwan. I'll be there for a little while, and then we'll see. He goes, okay. He didn't try to influence me at all, but he knew on that. And we'd already gone through this with my family in 2014 when I was picked up by the ICAC then and picked up by the police then. And we made the decision to move. My children were much younger. We made the decision to move out of there because, basically I didn't want my kids trapped in that world, and Jimmy was incredibly supportive then. So I feel eternally grateful, and I have my 76-year-old friend, and there's other people there, and they're in jail, and I know the world's going, yay, Jimmy, but my thing is he's made his stand. They took his company. I mean, that's one of the stories that people really... It's a very amazing thing. Many journalists are like, oh, he's in jail. And so that, they closed like a major newspaper. They shut down the Free Press when they shut down Apple Daily. I'm sorry, but if Apple Daily was alive, the other smaller guys would be alive. In other words, if you blow up the main encampment is what we were, then everybody else just gets picked off. They closed a newspaper. They took a company. They took a private entity company, which I don't think means anything to them. But it's amazing to me that that's not a bigger deal. I know that sounds, I'm a business guy, I'm looking at it. But, this was a company with 800 employees, worth hundreds of millions of dollars before they really knocked it down. You know what I'm saying? Boy, that's a big deal.
Did you hear that? They shut down the Free Press when they shut down Apple Daily. Steve Vines, a British journalist, writer, and broadcaster who spent most of his journalism career in Hong Kong since 1987, saw the rise and fall of Next Digital and Apple Daily firsthand.
The paper Apple Daily was founded in 1999, but Jimmy Lai, who'd previously been better known for being a tycoon in the retailing world and in clothing manufacturers, started a weekly magazine, Next Magazine, in 1990. And the impact of these two publications was just extraordinary. First of all, they were, from day one, very, very popular. And they literally transformed the shape of journalism in Hong Kong, both in the way that the paper was, in the way that they looked. I mean, when Apple Daily came out, people literally gasped because the tradition in Hong Kong had always been, in the Chinese language press at any rate, that the front page was just filled with adverts and you had to turn over before you get to any news. Apple Daily made bold use of photographs and big headlines and was just extraordinarily exciting to look at. Then you go into the content And the content was also quite surprising because on the one hand, it was kind of gossip and entertainment news and very highly popular stuff. But it also contained an enormous amount of serious coverage of politics and events, particularly in Hong Kong. And then it had a quite extensive international section. So for somebody like me who'd worked on newspapers in Britain, where there was a sharp division between the popular papers, which really didn't cover news very well, but were great on gossip and entertainment, and the so-called serious newspapers that were light on entertainment and gossip but carried a lot of news, it seemed extraordinary that you could combine those two elements in one paper. And of course, and this is equally important, that he was motivated to start Next Magazine a year after the Tiananmen massacre of pro-democracy protesters in Beijing in 1989. So from day one, the publications were very much in support of the democracy movement. They weren't embarrassed about that. And they built up an extensive readership among people who, like Jimmy Lai himself, were keen to see democratic development being extended to Hong Kong.
To give you a better idea of what kinds of newsroom Apple Daily used to have, here's an audio clip of Jimmy Lai's speech during the 25th anniversary celebration of Apple Daily on June 18th, 2020.
我哋對照國安法嘅做法就係，你哋用返你哋自己對自己嘅責任，對社會嘅責任。
Now with the national security law in place, I really don't know what to do, so it's up to you to continue to persist. I only ask for one thing: hold on to your conscience towards society. I won't tell you how to do it. Apple Daily has come this far today is all because of you. It has nothing to do with me. I appreciate very much what you have achieved today. Keep up the effort.
The downfall of a newspaper, founded by a businessman with a clear conscience, has determined the fate of press freedom in Hong Kong. Here's Steve Vines, describing the current state of press freedom in Hong Kong.
You know, I was in Hong Kong in the years when press freedom flourished. What I say with great regret is that there is no such thing as freedom of the press in Hong Kong anymore. More or less all, but not incidentally all, but more or less all publications online or in the printed form that expressed an independent view have been shut down. The public broadcaster, Radio Television Hong Kong, which when I was there was a public broadcaster, has become a government propaganda machine. Even the Hong Kong Journalists Association, which is an independent body, is now being threatened by closure, by being given a very high tax bill which will put it out of business. So everywhere you look, freedom of expression has already been expunged. All that the new law does is criminalizes all forms of independent media.
The Divide is a show produced by me, Iris Xu, and a special thanks to Philip Leskovsky. Next week, we will talk about the ongoing trial that pits colleagues against colleagues, employees against their employer, and aims at convicting Jimmy Lai for conspiring to collude with foreign forces at all cost.
I think the trial's meaningless. I have this sense in Beijing that when they said we're going to put him on trial, I see a guy who says, whatever, just do it. Get it over with.
In this trial, the government has intimidated other people under arrest from Apple Daily to give evidence against their former boss.